Welcome back to the CryptoWorld channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and this Bitcoin indicator is flashing a signal that predicted the last two Bitcoin pumps. And on top of that, we have the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index at a multi-year low, while the stock market is still bouncing from that low that we saw last week. This is actually good news for crypto. And so I'll be talking about all of that and more later in this video. Definitely stick around. Starting off on the daily Bitcoin chart, and obviously we're still holding above that range of support coming into play at around 29 to 30,000. But apart from that, there's nothing much else to add here on top of what I said yesterday. So zooming into the 4-hour Bitcoin chart, and you can clearly see that we're still playing out that bullish divergence, which is resulting in mostly choppy sideways price action as we've seen over the past few days as expected. But considering the fact that this bullish divergence is only visible on smaller timeframes like the 4-hour chart, it is starting to wear off because the RSI, for example, has just formed a lower high on the 4-hour chart. And generally speaking, a smaller bullish divergence like this on the 4-hour chart, for example, normally lasts for a few days, maybe up towards around a week before it starts to wear off. So this price action that we've seen over the past few days, close to over the past week, has been pretty much what I normally expect from a 4-hour bullish divergence. So due to the fact that this 4-hour bullish divergence might be beginning to wear off, we could see some more volatility return, potentially towards the end of this week, maybe going into next week. And a chart that I am paying attention to is this Bitcoin chart right here, which is basically just the 6-hour Bitcoin chart, but with this indicator, which is essentially the Bitcoin short positions on the Bitfinex exchange. And what is really interesting about these specific Bitcoin short positions is we normally see a massive spike in short positions come in right at a Bitcoin bottom, or at least a local Bitcoin bottom, just before the Bitcoin price pumps back to the upside. And if we simply take a look at the last couple of times this has happened in the Bitcoin short positions on the Bitfinex exchange, that happened right around here and right around here. And obviously, if you're looking at the Bitcoin price action during those two time periods where we saw a spike in the Bitcoin short positions, in both of those examples, they turned out to be great buying opportunities, at least for the shorter term, because in the first example, the Bitcoin price pumped over the next 1 week approximately before experiencing another Bitcoin dump. And in the second example, the Bitcoin price pumped for the next 2 weeks, over 2 weeks, before then the Bitcoin price turned around again. Now, something important to point out is obviously this spike just here actually occurred around 4 to 5 days ago, which means simply based on these two previous examples, according to the Bitcoin short positions on the Bitfinex exchange, the next Bitcoin pump might be short-lived. But with that being said, we still have quite a lot of Bitcoin short positions still active on this particular exchange compared to these previous examples, which means obviously there is still more room to the downside in the short positions, which is actually bullish for the Bitcoin price if those short positions continue to close. So simply based on this alone, we could be due for some more bullish price action in the shorter term at the very least. But obviously this is just one indicator. We need to be looking at some more indicators, such as the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index, which today has dropped down to a value of 8, which is extremely low. In fact, if you look at the entire history of this Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index, dating back since the beginning of 2018, the last time the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index was this low at a value of 8 or lower, that was actually back during March 2020, during that huge crash that we saw back then, while the stock market was also crashing. And even though Warren Buffett might not understand Bitcoin, he is definitely right when he says, get greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. Because obviously, if you got greedy, if you started buying a lot of Bitcoin during March 2020, as the Fear and Greed Index was down towards 8, you would have done very well. And then if you got fearful as the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index was sitting in extreme greed up towards around 90 to 95 back in February 2021, you would have also done pretty well. And then the next swing to the downside during June and July 2021, the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index was sitting in extreme fear for most of that time period. And obviously, if you got greedy during that time period, you would have done very well over the coming months. And then the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index got back towards greed back in October and November last year. And once again, if you took some profits off the table when the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index was sitting in greed, you would have done very well over the coming months. In fact, if I plot those times of extreme fear and extreme greed on the Bitcoin chart itself here on the 3-day time frame, once again, we experienced extreme fear back in March 2020, right around here. And then the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index entered back into extreme greed during this time period right here. And then it dropped back into extreme fear during June and July 2020. 2021, and then back into greed during October and November 2021. And once again, right now we're currently sitting in extreme fear. In fact, the most fear we've seen since March 2020, which is very interesting and definitely something to consider. And obviously, looking at the 3-day Bitcoin RSI, this has been oversold recently with the recent crash down towards 25,000. And the last time that the 3-day Bitcoin RSI well and truly entered into oversold territories, that was back during March 2020. And the time before that was at the end of the 2018 bear market. And something very similar can also be said about the monthly Bitcoin RSI approaching into the lower half of the RSI band. And we've actually only ever seen this happen just 3 other times in Bitcoin's entire price history. And of course, those time periods were March 2020, the end of the 2018 bear market, and the end of the 2014 bear market leading into 2015. And over on the weekly Bitcoin chart, the weekly Bitcoin RSI is not yet in oversold territories. So technically speaking, this does have some more room to the downside, but keep in mind the March 2020 crash did not see the weekly Bitcoin RSI enter into oversold territories. And in fact, right now we're basically at the same level as what the weekly Bitcoin RSI was sitting at during the March 2020 crash. And of course, as I've been mentioning over the past few days, we've seen a massive spike in volume on the weekly Bitcoin charts, which usually happens around the time of a Bitcoin bottom or very close to a Bitcoin bottom, historically speaking. So simply based on a lot of confluence between multiple different charts, indicators, and signals, it is simply more likely for the Bitcoin price to trend in the general bullish direction for at least the next couple weeks or so. Basically just talking about the somewhat shorter term. And if you want to know the midterm for Bitcoin, as in let's just say a few months from now, then we need to be keeping an eye on what the stock market is doing. And this right here is the Nasdaq 100 index on the daily time frame. And today we have seen a continuation in this bounce in the stock market that has formed since the end of last week. Now, obviously, this is very far away from being a full bullish recovery. But with that being said, we need to see the stock markets bounce in order to see some more bullish price action for crypto. So if we actually get a bounce in the stock market, this can really help out Bitcoin play out some more bullish price action. Because in case you are new to this channel, the stock market and the Bitcoin price are very correlated, which basically just means if we see a lot of bearish price action in the stock market, it's very likely we'll see something similar for Bitcoin and vice versa. If we see a lot of bullish price action in the stock market, we're most likely going to see something similar for Bitcoin as well. But whether or not we do play out some more bullish price action or potentially some more bearish price action, there's still ways to make money in crypto. And if you want to know how to do that, make sure you're checking out one of these uploads popping up right here on your screen, because in both of these videos, I review how I continue to make money in crypto no matter what prices are doing. But anyway, that is it for this update. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.